In today's video, we are going to try and make a perfect replica of our diamond play button, but here's the catch, we're gonna make it edible. Guys, in the past you have seen us do some very weird things with our diamond play button mold, and today we're going to try something a little bit different. Now, we have made filament molds, we have made candy molds, we have made an ice mold, and I want to try and make a mold that looks as close to the real one as possible. And I'm going to do that with cake. Here's the basic idea. You might be familiar with the internet phenomenon that is mirror glaze cakes. We're going to go ahead and try this with our diamond play mold button and see if we can make it look as close to the real one as possible. So if you have heard of or seen mirror glaze cakes, you might be a little bit daunted if you've taken a look at the recipe. However, it's actually deceptively simple. So what we're going to start out with is the mousse and then the cake, and then we'll go ahead and get started on that glaze. So for now, let's get our mousse melting. So to begin with, the main base, we are using mousse. Now the reason that you don't just use a regular cake is you need as smooth a surface as possible if you want to get that beautiful mirror glaze for a cake like this. So you coat it in mousse. Now, a normal mousse actually has eggs in it, you bake it, and it can be a very long drawn out process. However, I have found an amazing recipe that calls for using International Delight coffee creamer. Now, I found an Oreo flavor one because the boys here like that flavor, so we're gonna go ahead and go with that. Gelatin and a heavy cream. It's pretty simple to make. Now I am going to be beefing it up a little bit. I'm going to be using more gelatin and more chocolate than the recipe normally calls for to make sure that it is very, very solid, very, very rich, but also is going to hold the structure and that beautiful geometrical pattern that we have in our diamond play button. We are going to go ahead and start our chocolate and our creamer melting. We're going to get our gelatin blooming, and then this is actually kind of a critical step. We're going to make sure that our heavy cream and our bowl for whisking is as chilled as possible. This will actually help to make sure that the mousse forms correctly. So I'm going to toss this in the freezer, this in the fridge, and the rest of it on the stove. Go ahead and use really, really cold water, as cold as you can get it. Stir in your gelatin and then let it sit and bloom while you're melting your chocolate. Yep, that's about what it's gonna do. Now, I wasn't sure if I wanted to use semi-sweet or dark chocolate, but given the fact that we're gonna have such a sweet creamer base, I'm gonna go ahead and stick with the dark chocolate today. Normally, this recipe would have almost equal parts cream and chocolate chips, so I'm gonna be using a cup of creamer and we're gonna be using 2 cups of chocolate chips. We don't need this really high. We don't even need this to get hot. We just need everything to sort of melt together, because before we can even mix in the other ingredients, we'll need this back down to room temperature. All right, so our chocolate hasn't fully finished melting in yet, but that's just fine. Again, we don't want this to get overheated, so I've already turned off the heat. I'm gonna remove it, and I'm gonna keep stirring it until it's fully melted, but I'm also gonna go ahead and get started on the cream. Some of the chocolate is still being incorporated in there. Yep, that's cold. Instead of just 1 cup of cream, we're going to be doing about 1.5 cups. Well, that should do it. All right. Go ahead and whisk your cream until you get very, very heavy, stiff peaks, and then you should be good to go. All right, let's see. Yep, that's exactly where you want it. So this cream is heavy enough to hold its form even when you stop whipping it. That's what we're looking for. So now we just need to wait for our chocolate to cool a little bit more, add the gelatin and the cream, and our mousse will be done. Now to do that, if anybody has ever bloomed this thick of an amount of gelatin before, it does solidify. So you toss it back in the microwave for a few minutes, make it a liquid again, pour it back in. So we've got our chocolate, our gelatin, and our creamer all mixed together. Now we're gonna fold in the heavy cream, then it'll be ready to pour into our mold. And with this, you just wanna do about half at a time. All right, now, just like if you've ever made a cake before and you need to make sure to tamp out as many bubbles as you can, we're gonna tap this before we even pour it into the mold to make sure we can get all of those bubbles to rise to the surface, because we don't want them in the mold. We need that as smooth as possible. Make sure your mold is clean and dry. Silicone molds usually work best for this, which is thankfully what we have. Let's go ahead and pour the first layer. So here's my goal. I'm gonna pour a very thin layer of mousse. I'm gonna let that super chill. I have a piece of cake that's actually been freezing in our freezer with everything else. I'm gonna try and cut that to the right size of the diamond play mold itself, put that in, and then pour the rest of the mousse over it. All right. It's a very simple way to make sure that we cut this to the right size. And the good news is, we have a lot of examples. That is about the correct size of the diamond play. Now I'm going to cut it in just a little bit more to make sure that the mousse can fill in around the edges. All right, and then height-wise, I think we're actually pretty close. I'll probably cut off just a little bit here off of the top just to make sure that it's not too high up out of the mousse, but if it is, it's probably not going to be that big of a problem. I'm more concerned about it being too small than being too big here. All right, let's take a look. All right, definitely shorter, definitely smaller. Let's see if we can get that into our mold. Perfect. All right, let's put this in the freezer and let's let it set overnight, and then we'll glaze it. Here we go. Here we go. So it has been 24 hours. We have let our cake and mousse set in our diamond play button mold. So now we're gonna go ahead and get started on our mirror glaze. To start that out, we're gonna be using yet more gelatin. We've got 3/4 cups cold water. We're gonna have 3 tablespoons of gelatin. Mix it all, let it bloom, and then get cooking. So then you're gonna need a tall heat-resistant bowl, and you're gonna get 1 3/4 cups white chocolate chips, pour them in, and add 2/3 cups sweetened condensed milk. Now, even though we're using sweetened condensed milk and white chocolate, when you pour on a glaze and you don't add any white food coloring, surprisingly enough, it's actually very, very transparent. So something else that we're going to be adding is titanium dioxide. Now, what a lot of people don't know is most titanium that is used in the world is actually turned white and is used for coloring things. So it's completely edible. This is food grade. It's even pure organic. So we're going to be adding about a tablespoon of this to our mix to help make sure it's very opaque. So now we're going to go ahead and leave this in the heat-resistant container. We're going to simmer some water, some sugar, and some corn syrup on the stove, and then we'll combine it all together. So for the stove, you're going to be using 200 milliliters of water, 200 milliliters of corn syrup, and then your sugar. Now, 200 milliliters basically equals out to about 4/5 of a cup, but if you have one of these really nice measuring cups for the kitchen, it'll actually show you where the milliliters are. All right, so once your sugar, your water, and your corn syrup comes to a simmer, you're gonna leave it there for about 2 minutes, and then you're gonna add your bloom gelatin, and you're gonna stir until it dissolves and simmers once again, then take it off the heat. All right, we're gonna let that sit for just a couple of minutes, and then we're gonna stir. While that chocolate's melting and before we want to stir it, there's another part about the diamond play button that we need to address, the diamond itself. So, obviously I don't just have an extra giant diamond laying around, but I do have some extra isomalt. So, not too long ago, Nate made this vacuum form mold of the diamond play button. It's not going to have exactly the same ridges and edges that the diamond itself has, but it should be pretty close. We'll see what it looks like when it comes out. Possibly one candy diamond play button coming right up. All right, so one really important thing to note about making any sort of mirror glaze for any dessert is that you don't want to use a regular blender because that's going to put bubbles into your mix. So you want to use an immersion blender, which goes down into the liquid itself and blends from the bottom up. So hopefully this has been sitting long enough that our chocolate's melted. Let's see if we can get a nice smooth consistency. So that's the consistency that we want. That is exactly how white we want it. We're going to let it cool down to about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we're going to add in our silver. So now we're going to go ahead and mix in the colors, see if we can get a nice silver shine. Usually you use like half a teaspoon. I'm just going to start with half a container. Yep, seems right. All right, so we've got a very shiny bowl of mirror glaze. And we have a frozen mousse cake. Let's see how it turned out. Well, it's already coming out, so that's a good sign. When you're making a mirror glaze, you don't want to have it actually sitting on any surface because then you're going to have a really hard time lifting it out of any of the excess glaze. So we're actually going to elevate it up onto some cups, and then we'll be able to flip it over, pour the glaze, and take it off. Not too bad. So here's going to be one of the more difficult parts. We don't actually want to keep the diamond silver. We want that part to be clear. So let's see if our ice malt diamond worked. Well, that's about the right shape. We did lose some detail, but we do have an isomalt diamond play. First pour. It usually goes on pretty thin. That's okay. We're going to do a few coats. So the mirror glaze didn't set quite as hard as I want it to, so I'm going to toss it in the freezer for a few minutes so we can pull it out and make it a little bit more shiny and kind of fill in these sides a little bit too. Alright, so I pulled this out of the freezer. It did set better, so now I'm going to do one more layer. I reheated this, added a little bit more luster dust to it. See if we can make it shiny. We'll let that settle. So you can see that we've actually put the luster dust into the glaze itself. Unfortunately, there was just so much glaze and not enough dust. Normally when you're using this sort of dust, you're putting it in big chunks and then it swirls throughout the glaze. Trying to make a solid mirror glaze, not sure that's gonna happen. So we're gonna try something else. This one's solid mousse, so it's much softer than our last one. Aha! All right, so our chocolate mousse is pretty much done in the form of the diamond play button itself, but the diamond didn't come out great last time. So we are going to try our silicone mold and our isomalt again. Silicone has a tendency of making isomalt bubbles, so we're gonna try and add a very thin coating of like degreasing oil, see if that helps at all. There are a few bubbles that are starting to form there, but a lot less than usual. We're just not gonna breathe and we're just gonna hope. Perfect. All right. Now this one does have more bubbles than I wanted it to, but I still think it's gonna be okay. Here's the plan for round two. I've got an airbrusher and I have got edible silver sheen. We're gonna see if we can make this work. Okay, there are absolutely bubbles, but given that it's isomalt in a silicone mold, I'm super thrilled. We're gonna separate it a little bit. Now, because this is a food grade and not a permanent spray paint, I'm gonna go ahead and just spray the back of it now while it's still in the silicone, and I can wipe the silicone out after. So it's not entirely flawless, but to be honest, this is basically what our diamond play button looked like right before we put it in the foundry. I turned our diamond play button into food.
I see that.
I see you have a sword.
What? Who would do that?
I slaved away, like at least 10 minutes of my life was spent on this. You're gonna cut it with a sword.
But it's for eating, right?
Yes. Go, go, go. Really?
I don't trust my aim.
This is a solid mousse diamond play button.
Wow, that mousse cuts really clean.
Thank you.
Yeah, most of the time you cut the surface of a cake and it gets all messed up. That's like, slice.
So now, you'll just have to tell me, how does our diamond play button taste?
Very rich.
Yeah, no,
I don't think I would want to eat a whole button.
And then the whole isomalt diamond, which was decent, worked better than we've ever had an isomalt in a silicone mold turn out before, but then we did hit it with the blowtorch, so now you see that discoloration with the silver. So, if you do need to try and pour isomalt into a silicone mold, a very thin layer of cooking oil will work. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a lot better than what you would get otherwise. It's on your nose!
Yeah.
Got a little bit of something on your... I don't judge your, yeah, you got it. Hey guys, we have a bunch of new stuff in our shop, including kits that you can build. Click down there if you want to see them, and we'll talk to you in the next one. See you then.